Thank you very much and good morning. It's great to be here. I think I was here 4 years ago on Refugee Sunday, so it's great that you're still looking at the issue of refugees together and how we can bring hope. What I'm going to do in this first section is look at the quiz that's on your table, and we'll see how you fared with the answers. It's not an exam. We're not going to ask you to hand them in or anything, but we will look at the answers. So first of all, who is a refugee? What do we think? A, B, or C? It is B. Now, that definition comes from a much longer version, where this is the internationally agreed definition of a refugee. So a refugee is a person who, owing to a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his or her nationality and is unable to, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to, avail himself or herself of the protection of that country. Quite a mouthful, but the two key things are there must be persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution, and the person must have left their country to find safety somewhere else. As I said, that is an internationally recognized definition. It comes from the UN Convention on Refugees in 1951, which the UK helped to draw up, that the UK signed, and which we are still members of. Thinking about persecution can be quite difficult. I mean, for children, I would say if you think of bullying, we all know what bullying is. Well, if we think of really, 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 really bad bullying to the extent where someone has to leave their home or their country, that's what we're talking with when we talk about persecution. It can include war, imprisonment, and torture. So the second question, who is an asylum seeker? And this time the answer is, it is C. Yeah, very good. A person who has applied for protection as a refugee but is waiting for their application to be determined. So here in Britain, they apply to the Home Office, and then the Home Office then needs to decide, does this person have a well-founded fear of persecution or not? And it is, at the moment, it is a legal right, an international right, and a right in this country for anyone to claim asylum. Question 3. How many refugees and internally displaced people are there in the world? How optimistic or pessimistic are you? The answer is B. These are figures from last year, 103 million. So it includes those who are internally displaced. So they've moved to another part of their own country. That could be due to persecution, but it could also be due to famine or other natural disasters. The statistics also show, if they're broken down a bit further, that around the world there are 4.9 million asylum seekers and 32.5 million refugees. If we look at the graph, this shows how numbers around the world have changed over the past few decades. In 2013, the figure got to 51 million people on the move, and at that point, it was stated that that was the same as the number of people who were displaced at the end of the Second World War. And in 10 years, it's doubled in terms of how many people are displaced around the world. So where do refugees in particular, where do they go to find safety? What percentage of the world's refugee population is housed by low or middle income countries? What do we think? C is the right answer. 74% of refugees are moving to low or middle income countries. And if we break it down further, 69% move to a neighboring country. Most refugees don't travel far. So, for example, with Afghanistan, a lot will move across to Pakistan or Iran. With Syria, people moved to Turkey, to Lebanon, to Jordan. Other people travel further, but the majority only cross a local border. And the next one, which 3 countries host the most refugees? Yeah, I'm hearing A. A is the right answer. So these are the figures from the end of last year. Turkey with 3.7 million, Colombia with 2.5 million, and Germany with 2.2 million. We don't appear in the top figures at all. So in terms of asylum claims, how many asylum claims were there last year? What do we think to these figures? Any suggestions? It is, in fact, the middle one. It's B, 74,751. That is a large number, but compared to 4.9 million around the world, it's not as large as that. If we compare to other countries in Europe, Germany received over 217,000, France 137,000, and Spain 116,000. So the idea that we are being overrun or that everybody is coming here is not based on fact. This graph will show that the numbers of people claiming asylum in this country have increased recently, but we also have to bear in mind the global situation has changed in the last few years, and all the numbers have increased recently. In the same way that we would look at climate change as being a challenge that all nations need to help to resolve, at Restore we believe that the movement of refugees is a global challenge that all countries need to play their part in, and we shouldn't be opting out ourselves. So, question 7. When did Birmingham become a city of sanctuary? Yeah, I can hear people saying C. It is C, 2015. City of Sanctuary is a nationwide movement that was started in Sheffield about 20 years ago, and it encourages cities, towns, and villages to commit to welcoming and integrating refugees. One of the key elements that it requires is for the local authority to sign up formally to being a city of sanctuary. And Birmingham City Council did that in 2015. And on the back of that, we can kind of push them to do various things. And they have taken it seriously. It's not just been a tick box, and we'll come to that again later. So in terms of resettled Afghan refugees, so these are Afghans who left Afghanistan and were evacuated or were linked to the British forces or were interpreters in the embassy. How many of those Afghans has Birmingham committed to taking before March next year? It is, in fact, A, 220, which doesn't seem that big, but there's pledges going on all over the country. So in terms of how many Birmingham's taken in proportion to its size, that is probably what would have been expected. So question 9, approximately how many Ukrainian refugees came to Britain by the end of last year? It is in fact C, 154,500. And the Ukrainians come on 2 schemes. The smaller scheme is where they've got relatives here already, so they can come on a family visa scheme. But the majority have come on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, where British people have opened their homes or their properties to offer hospitality for at least 6 months. And it has been a tremendous outpouring of generosity, and it has involved a lot of people who've not been involved with refugees before, who've found the experience quite eye-opening. At the moment, in this country, we have schemes of different kinds for Ukrainians, for Afghans, for people coming from Hong Kong. They are the only countries where there is a safe route. So there are no safe routes to our country from places like Syria at the moment, Sudan, Yemen, Eritrea, or any other country, which is why they need to choose to travel different ways. And it's why people travel in small boats. And one of the key things that we need to remember, we've seen that definition of who is a refugee. It's all about persecution and leaving your country. But in the same document, it also says that people should not be penalized purely by the means in which they travel. Sometimes they have no choice in how they travel. The focus is to be on a decision relating to whether they were persecuted, whether they would be further persecuted if they were returned, not on the route of going to another country. So the final question relates to the government policy at the moment. Planned government laws, which are going through Parliament at the moment, will do which of those 3 things? What do we think? Yeah, I've heard somebody say the answer. It is A. So the new laws would effectively stop people who come in a small boat from claiming asylum. I wish that the law was incorporating B and C. If it was B, and there were more safe routes, then fewer people would need to take routes like the boats across the channel. If it was C, allowing asylum seekers to work, the government would be happy with that because it would reduce the cost to the taxpayer, which is something they talk about a lot. It would also fill job vacancies, but very important from our perspective, it would help with the well-being of asylum seekers who are left for months and years in limbo, not being allowed to work. However, at the moment, despite a lot of lobbying by charities, members of the public, members of Parliament, the Archbishop of Canterbury and other bishops have spoken against this law in the House of Lords, the UN has also said that the bill is contrary to the 1951 Convention and contrary to international law, but the government seems set on this path of pushing it through. In a little while, we'll be looking at some Bible verses, and one of them includes the words, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." I have a question. If Jesus was in a small boat, how would we treat him? And we have to remember that Jesus and his family, when Jesus was very, very young, were refugees themselves. We believe that all people are made in the image of God, including those that arrive on small boats. If we recognize that all are made in the image of God and all are loved by him, then as Christians, that should impact how we welcome, how we treat refugees and asylum seekers, regardless of what the government thinks. Sometimes we are called to be countercultural in order to bring hope to refugees.
On your tables are pictures of rucksacks. Now, I am going to give you a warning that in 5 minutes you are going to have to leave home. So imagine you have a rucksack. You have 5 minutes. That's all the time you've got. What are you going to pack in your rucksack? You may want to discuss it with the others at the table. You may just want to get on and pack your rucksack. 5 minutes, that's all you've got.
Okay, the time has come. You've got no time now to be able to go and get anything else. So whatever you've got, that's it. So, is there any table that would like to tell us a couple of things that you've got?
Money and a phone.
Money and a phone, yeah, great. And a charger.
A charger.
Yeah.
Any sentimental items like some photos or a teddy bear, things like that.
Yeah.
We
Anyone
said
else?
even though we couldn't have our passport, we would take our birth certificates and driving licenses so we had ID.
Excellent. We said that, but only because Jeremy's on our table. Else we wouldn't have thought of it.
Change of clothing.
Yeah.
Non-perishable food.
Yeah.
Evidence of your persecution, whatever it might be.
Essential meds.
Yeah.
And glasses.
Yeah.
Sleeping bag.
We thought toilet roll would be useful.
Water bottle.
What was that, sorry?
Water bottle.
Yeah.
The Bible.
Oh.
You rather snookered me, Susan, because, I used to do a lot of travelling and I had a whole list of things to pack before I went. The 3 important things were passport, tickets, money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tea bags.
Great.
Medication.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Any bank documentation you have for your money in your accounts that you can actually take as cash.
Yes. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. That's great. I wonder what a typical day for you looks like. I wonder what a typical day for an asylum seeker looks like.
A day in the life.
I woke up at 5:30 a.m. because the baby was screaming for a feed.
I hadn't slept much. I lay awake thinking about my life. I'd just dozed off when the bloke in the room next door switched on his radio, very loud. Thought about my children.
I wandered, bleary-eyed, into the kitchen to make a coffee. I had a shower, and then I found the other kids were arguing because we'd run out of Frosties.
There's no point in getting up, as there's nothing in the house for breakfast. My benefits have run out, as I bought some food for a friend who had nothing to eat. Maybe I'll soon be the same soon. I thought about my wife. I wonder, where is she now?
I dashed off to work via the childminders.
I wish I could work. It would give me a reason to get up. I trained as an accountant in my country, but all I've got today is a couple of hours of my English class this afternoon, and without that, there'd be nothing to do today. Life is so empty for me. I cried out to God for mercy, for justice, for strength to live another day.
The traffic was really busy, and I got to work late. And of course, I bumped into my head of department coming out of a breakfast meeting just as I arrived. I'm never late, usually. Where's the justice in that? Later, I met a colleague at the water cooler. He seemed a bit down, as he didn't get the promotion he wanted. And I know they could do with the extra money as they're having an extension built.
I think they call me vulnerable, and that's why I get invited to the group session at my GP surgery. I was an opposition politician. I stood up for justice and democracy. In the group today, we talked about what had happened to us in our home countries. I think it was supposed to make us feel better, but it didn't change anything for people in my country.
When I got home, I caught up with my emails. There was one from a friend who's doing some medical work somewhere near Amman. I didn't even know where Amman was, or that it was the capital of Jordan until she went there. She says there are still new people arriving from Syria, even after all these years. I was surprised, as Syria's not really in the news anymore.
When I got home, I found a letter. That's unusual. It's a message from the Home Office saying they want to interview me at last. But will they believe me? Or will they want to send me back home?
I replied to my friend in Jordan, but what can you say? Working with refugees is rather different from life here. It sounds such a risky place.
I was thinking about going to the local church again, but I don't understand much as it's all in English. So I'll probably go back to the Amharic-speaking Orthodox church, even though it is 2 buses, or a long walk if you've no bus fare.
I went out for a meal with some friends this evening. It was fine until one of them mentioned a newspaper article she'd read about asylum seekers crossing the channel in small boats. Then things got a little bit heated about whether we should let them into the country or not. I wondered, why can't we be a bit more welcoming to people in need? I got home at 10:30. Everyone else was asleep and in bed.
I've nothing to do tonight, so I tried to read, but I couldn't concentrate, so I went to bed.
I'm going on a trip to a dream location, an exciting, exotic holiday adventure. I could see the sunshine and feel its tropical heat. I was at the border showing my passport. Then suddenly I was surrounded by soldiers. They said I couldn't cross the border. They pointed guns at me. When I tried to explain, I felt a great whack against my head. I woke up suddenly, gasping for breath. Then slowly I realised, what a nightmare. But at least it's not real, thank God.
I still can't sleep, despite the medicines All I can think of is my problems and what will happen if they deport me. The past haunts me, and the future is a desolate unknown.
We have two short readings this morning. The first is from Luke chapter 14, verse 12 to 14, and is on page 1047 of the Church Bibles. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives or your rich neighbours. If you do, they may invite you back and say you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." And the second is from Matthew 25, verse 35. "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." This is the word of the Lord.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what does Restore do and why do we do it. So I'm going to start from a faith perspective, and I'm going to focus on the second Bible reading. Jesus said that when you gave food to the hungry, or drink to the thirsty, or welcome the stranger, we did it to him. The more I think about this, it just sounds a little bit odd, doesn't it? Because Jesus actually isn't here physically in the room with us. But if Jesus was here physically with us, how would we treat him? I'm sure we'd make sure he had food and drink, and we'd treat him as a very special guest. So is that the big challenge? The way that we would treat Jesus if he was here physically, should that be the way that Jesus wants us to treat the hungry, the thirsty, and the stranger? At Restore, we focus on "I was a stranger and you welcomed me" for our work with refugees and asylum seekers. We also believe that God is a God of justice who stands against oppression. So we want to see justice, protection, and safety for those who've been persecuted in their home countries. And we also want to see welcome, justice, and compassion in the way in which we treat them when they come here to our country. We want to see that at all levels, as individuals, as churches, as a government, and as a system, that all would be offering welcome, justice, and protection. How we treat people matters to God. For me personally, being involved with Restore is about putting faith into action, but it also comes from a bit of personal experience. Many years ago, when I was a stranger, I worked in Pakistan and Afghanistan for a while, and my overriding memories are of a very, very hospitable culture there. Everywhere I went, there would be people who would befriend me. It was part of who they were. It was ingrained in who they were. And it made an incredible difference to me as a stranger in a very different place to the country I was used to. So when I came back to Britain, I wanted to give that back in some way. And eventually I moved to Birmingham, I heard about Restore, and I started off as a volunteer. Some years later, I joined the staff team. So what do? Well, we have a very clear vision. Restore's vision is for a society into which all refugees and asylum seekers are welcomed, valued, and integrated. We know we can't do that all on our own, but that is what we're hoping to do, both ourselves and in partnership with others. And we seek to do that through three key areas: building relationships and equipping for integration, motivating for action, and working for change. Building relationships is generally through befriending and group social activities. Befriending is really a very simple idea. We train volunteers and then link them to a refugee or an asylum seeker to offer welcome and relational support. What are we hoping to achieve? Well, we hope that befriending will build community and friendship across cultures, that it will combat loneliness and isolation, which we heard echoed in the drama earlier. We hope it will improve conversational English and improve an understanding of Birmingham, Britain, and our culture, history, and traditions. Does it work? Well, we did a survey of people befriended last year, and we were very encouraged by the response. 100% of those who responded said meeting their befriender had helped them to feel welcomed. 97% said it had helped them feel less lonely, it had helped them improve their English, and it helped them to understand more about life in Birmingham and the UK. People submitted comments as well, which I think put flesh on the bones of the statistics. One person, a befriended asylum seeker, said this: "Restore paired me with a befriender who actually changed my life. Having someone to talk to was a big problem for me until my befriender came and took that burden away. She's very kind-hearted, is always ready to listen, and has helped me regain my self-confidence." And I think I would add into this mix, the gift of listening is really important here, that people have the opportunity to be heard. We hope that befriending will be mutually beneficial, and many of our volunteers talk about how they've learnt and grown through their befriending experience. And a bit later, we're going to hear from Becky about her experience of befriending. We aim to start 50 new befriending matches a year, or at least 50. And at the moment, we have just over 100 ongoing befriending matches with people from 27 different countries. We had to be realistic. It's not always easy. One of my colleagues said recently, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It can be challenging if you're trying to build a relationship of trust with people who've already faced pain, rejection, and a breakdown of trust in their own country. It can be daunting if there is a language barrier. And it can be a challenge when an asylum seeker is living with great uncertainty. But overall, my experience would be that befriending is enriching for both sides of that relationship. We also run a range of group social activities. They have similar aims: building relationships, improving English, learning about Birmingham, having fun, ending isolation and loneliness. So we run men's activities and also women's activities every 2 weeks, going to places like museums, gardens, walks in the countryside. Recently, the men's group were involved with the Canal Trust and did some litter picking. The women's group have done some bring and share events as well. It's all about building community and enabling people to meet more people. And we also run occasional activities for families. So that's about building relationships. But the other two areas of our work, firstly, motivating for action. This is where we seek to raise awareness of issues about refugees, either through our training course, through speaking engagements, through involvement in Refugee Week, through mailings to supporters and volunteers. With this, the key thing we're looking for is not just sharing the information, we want to motivate for action, so that at the end of it, people do something based on what they've heard. And then thirdly, we have the whole area of working for change. This is to improve systems and services for asylum seekers, and believe me, there's a lot that could be changed for the better at the moment. And so we've done a lot of campaigning for a system that is just and compassionate. Restore is part of a coalition called Together with Refugees, which is made up of over 500 organisations around the country. The symbol of the coalition is the orange heart, and work has been challenging the government on recent policies. Last year, it was all to do with changing how they would treat asylum seekers, whether they came by a particular way or not. It was also challenging the issue of sending people to Rwanda. More recently, it's challenging the current illegal migration bill, because we believe that there are elements in it which are illegal and need to be changed. We don't want to see people travelling by boats across the Channel. We want to see more safe routes. A key to resolving the issue would be to have more safe routes for countries like Syria, Yemen, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Sudan. We agree that the current system is costly, but there's a massive backlog that the government has allowed to build up. It could be reduced by speeding up decision-making. It could be reduced by allowing asylum seekers to work. Just to finish on what we talk about, so that it's a more positive message than challenging the government, returning to befriending. Within befriending, we often find that there are things to celebrate. Certainly, when somebody is believed by the Home Office and given refugee status, that is a major point of celebration. But it can also happen when somebody's English improves, when there is a family reunion and family members come together who've not been together for months or maybe years. It can be where somebody starts volunteering or starts to get a job. Welcoming the stranger can bring us relationships and joy that we would otherwise miss out on.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Becky has said that she's willing to come and share with us what it was like for her when she was a befriender for Restore.
I've been asked to speak, as Susan just said, because, I volunteered with Restore for about a year as a befriender. My motivation was actually similar to what Jeremy just said. Having lived abroad myself, I knew what it was like to arrive in a new country, to not speak the language, not understand how to navigate, how to access doctors, things like that. And so this was a way I could pay that forward now, here, living back in the UK. So I was paired with a Syrian lady who lived here. She's married, she's got 4 children. Her older 3 were at 3 different schools, and then she had a little one at home with her. So I used to mostly meet her at her house because trying to get out with the little one was difficult, especially because when I was free, it was nap time. So we would sit and chat. We occasionally went out, so we met in the city centre a few times, and I took her to the library, took her to museums, and tried to think of places that she could then take her children at the weekends and things. So I took them up to Sutton Park as well, because she lived over in Erdington. So did different things like that. She was learning English and just wanted somebody that she could chat with and practice her English. So we used to meet once a fortnight, and we would just chat for a couple of hours. She would often have school letters that she'd been sent that she didn't understand, so I would try and help her to understand those, or she'd had an email and she didn't understand what she had to do to access that service, or she was trying to do something and would come and say, "Oh, Becky, can you help me?" I remember she was practicing for her theory test once, and you have to do a video where you press where there's hazards, and she didn't understand quite what it was she was meant to do. So we sat there and practiced and watched this video together. So it was just a really nice time to sort of sit and chat, to be friends. It wasn't very much. It was once a fortnight for a couple of hours. But had a really lovely time with her. Her husband used to own a Syrian sweet shop in Syria. So I used to have really lovely Syrian sweets quite regularly as well. So I did really well out of it. So it was great. If you want to be I'm sorry if I'm going to pinch what you're going to say, but Restore do 3 sessions that you have to do before you become a befriender in the evenings, and then they'll pair you up. But the staff are really great. They check in with you regularly, and they're available if you need it. So you get loads of support in doing it too. So I'd highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. It's always really helpful to hear personal experience rather than just the theory from me. So brilliant. I am going to talk a little bit about befriending and maybe augment what Becky's just said. We are always looking for new volunteers, and the way into befriending, as Becky has said, is through our 3-session training course, which we run 3 times a year. We started one last week, so if you're really keen, you could join that one and do sessions 2 and 3, and then week 1 in October, or we will run one in October as well. So there are options through the year to join in. And it's only at the end of the course, when you've found out more about it, that you actually opt in, apply. So it's still optional. We're not, we haven't signed on the dotted line before you come to the training. So I would encourage you. I mean, it's great to hear, Becky saying the time commitment that was involved. That is what we ask for, to meet somebody once a fortnight. I would challenge the bit about, well, it's not very much. It's huge, all right? Because everything that a befriender offers is something that would not be there otherwise. And our befrienders meeting with people makes a big difference in their lives. Other ways of being involved with refugees, other organisations, would include hosting activities. That is something that you've done at Christchurch before. It's a party we had just before the pandemic for refugee families. But I know as well that you've hosted events for Birch and for King's Heath Action for refugees, and they've benefited from using your building as well. If you want to find out more about Restore, you could come along to our annual celebration, which is on the 5th of July at St Martin in the Bullring, and you'd be very welcome to be part of that, to find out more and see if we can inspire you a bit more to get involved. You can sign up for our occasional newsletter, which gives news about what we're doing, but it also gives news about campaigning and how various things can be challenged. We'd also encourage you to pray. Prayer is so important. It can be challenging working in this field, so do pray for Restore, for the staff, for the volunteers, but also for the people that we support in the uncertainty that they live through. But also, please pray for the government. It would be amazing to see this current bill wiped out, and so it doesn't become law. It needs something miraculous to happen within government for that to happen, so please do pray. We really do need a much more compassionate response and much more truth being told by politicians about the situation that exists. You could donate financially to Restore, to other charities. We are a charity, we're a project of Birmingham churches together, and we rely on income from individuals, churches, and grant-making trusts. Details of who to contact in terms of emails on our website are on the screen, but also you can link into us through Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Another organisation you might consider supporting is St Chad's Sanctuary. They are a joint Catholic and Salvation Army project in the city centre. They run English classes for asylum seekers who aren't yet eligible to go to college, but they also run an amazing clothes project where they collect clothes and then give them particularly to newly arrived asylum seekers who may not have very much in the rucksack. If you're thinking about what you were packing earlier, we talked about a change of clothes. It's not a whole wardrobe. So donations of second-hand clothes, new underwear and socks are greatly appreciated. Their email is on the screen to get more details of when you can donate and what they want. But usually what they're really keen to have is men's clothes in small sizes. City of Sanctuary is a national organisation, and it's really a shout out for the City Council who are living up to their commitment in this. They have been the ones who've been coordinating resettlement schemes for Afghan Syrians and also the schemes for Ukrainians in the city. And they're also very supportive of the volunteer sector too. I encourage you to find out more about Together with Refugees and the campaigns that they're organising and the Lift the Ban campaign. There just needs to be more and more people letting MPs know what we would like to happen rather than them keep saying the British public wants this. Well, actually, some of the British public do not want this, and we need them to know that. Finally, something to be involved in is Refugee Week. It starts next Saturday. The theme for this year is compassion, which is brilliant. It is coordinated by Celebrating Sanctuary, voluntary sector organisation that supports refugee arts. And again, you can find details of all the events on their website. But next Saturday, there's the local event of a family event in the Mac Outdoor Arena from 1 till 5:30. The following Saturday, there are events in Centenary Square and Symphony Hall. But also the following Saturday at 10 o'clock, there is a March for Compassion. Restore, the Refugee and Migrant Centre, and Asylum Matters are trying to organise this as an opportunity to show solidarity with refugees and walk from Waterstones right through to Centenary Square. We had a small event last year. We're trying to build on it. So if you are free and would like to come, you would be very, very welcome, just to show that there are more people who would like a welcoming response to refugees. So there are lots of ways to be involved. Have a look at the websites. Chat to me at the end. But one message I would like you to take away is you can bring hope to refugees in the way that you respond.